India has the potential to become a global superpower, a state with an extensive ability to exert influence or to project power in much of the world. Factors that contribute to a nation acquiring such clout are economic, political, demographic, military, and cultural. The world has been experiencing turmoil and turbulence over the past more than 3 years, the like of which it has not witnessed in many decades in the past. The COVID-19 pandemic resulted in severe health and economic jolts to the global community. While it was still in the throes of recovering from this crisis, the world was dealt a huge blow by the Russian invasion of Ukraine. In addition to the disruption of vital supply chains, the world also has to confront acute shortage and high prices of food, energy, and fertilizers. Not only the developing, but also the developed countries in Europe, USA, and others have staggered under its serious impact. In the midst of all this volatility and uncertainty, India has emerged as a beacon of hope for the world. India is today viewed as a partner of choice and indispensable to seeking solution to some of the most formidable challenges like climate change, economic recovery, health care, terrorism, and other problems confronting the world. In the post-pandemic period, unlike many Western European countries, Indian economy was able to bounce back. In 2020, India was the 6th largest economy. In 2022, India overtook the United Kingdom as the world's 5th largest economy. The International Monetary Fund projects that India's economy will expand 6.8%, more than double the rate of China, and that it will be the world's fastest growing major economy in 2023. The nation of 1.4 billion people is on track to move into 3rd place ahead of Germany and Japan by 2030, according to economists. With a total GDP of US $3.5 trillion today, the target of $5 trillion does not appear to be far away. While most countries from whom leadership was expected to effectively confront the health and economic threats of the COVID-19 pandemic were found lacking in rising up to the challenge, India managed to convert the unforeseen threats into an opportunity by following bold yet prudent policies. While the whole world, particularly the developed countries, were competing with each other to provide ever larger stimuli to their economies, India pursued a very measured and balanced policy approach. India has continued to provide essential food items to more than 800 million of its population for more than 2 years to ensure that the decline in the earning capacity of the working population due to the extended lockdowns did not adversely impact upon the survival and well-being of the populace at the bottom of the economic pyramid. The agricultural sector is a central pillar of the Indian economy, employing 60% of the nation's workforce, feeding 1.4 billion population, and contributing to about 17% of its GDP. Indian agriculture is growing at 9% per year and is the world's 2nd largest producer of food. Aided by higher agriculture credit, public and private investment, increased usage of quality seeds and fertilizers, expansion of acreage under irrigation, use of artificial intelligence and drone, and economic security provided by PM Kisan Samman Nidhi, Indian agricultural production is predicted to increase to US $24 billion by 2025. In 2022, export of rice stood at $6.2 billion, sugar at $2.78 billion, and food processing at $69.4 million. India has speedily created capacity to support thousands of startups, a few billion smartphones, and data rates that rank among the lowest in the world. The government is spending nearly 20% of its budget this fiscal year on capital investments. PM Gati Shakti scheme, also known as National Master Plan for Multimodal Connectivity, a mega project worth $1.2 trillion has been launched to provide competitive advantage for manufacturing in India. PM Gati Shakti incorporates the infrastructure schemes of various ministries and state governments like Bharatmala, Sagarmala, inland waterways, dry and land ports, Udan, etc. Indian airports have risen to 147 from the existing 74. The Indian civil aviation sector is expected to become the world's third largest within the decade. Rail transportation is undergoing significant changes in response to the growing demand for fast transportation between and inside cities. The major rail industry trends involve drones and smart sensors for inspecting railway tracks, digital communication platforms, and automatic train control, which reduces technical errors and improves traffic information flows. Vande Bharat Express, India's first indigenously built semi-speed train, was flagged off by PM Narendra Modi. Now there are 8 Vande Bharat trains operating in India. The ports in India serve as a backbone for international trade, coastal shipping, and cruise shipping. The Government of India has taken concerted efforts in the direction of expansion and modernization of major ports of the country. Infrastructure development and capacity augmentation of major ports is an ongoing process. It involves construction of new berths and terminals, mechanization of existing ones, capital dredging for deepening of drafts for attracting large vessels in port channels, development of road and rail connectivity, and sustained development of coastal communities. The cargo handling capacity of the major ports of India has crossed 1,534 million tons per annum. No country can become a global power unless it has a strong and impenetrable military defense. India has the third largest military force with a strength of above 1.44 million active personnel. India has the largest volunteer military of over 51 lakhs and the third largest defense budget in the world. India conducted 38 missile tests in 2022, which included a naval anti-ship short-range missile and helicopter-launched anti-ship missile. Spending rupees 31,000 crores, the present government has started building 64 strategic roads and 103 bridges along the border. In the continuing series of hand-to-hand skirmishes, the intruding Chinese troops were pushed back in Doklam and were beaten up in Tawang, Arunachal by our Indian soldiers. India used to be a big importer of arms, but in the last 8 years, it has upped its defense exports by 8 times. In 2021-22, India's defense exports to 75 countries touched a record 13,000 crore. Around 70% of defense production was done by around 50 Indian companies in the private sector, showcasing the country's growing prowess of indigenous manufacturing and a major milestone in the path towards Atmanirbhar Bharat. Prime Minister Narendra Modi commissioned the country's first indigenous aircraft carrier, INS Vikrant, at Cochin Shipyard Limited on September 2, 2022. India also developed military bases in Mauritius, Tajikistan, Madagascar, Oman, Iran, Bhutan, Singapore, and Sri Lanka. Without innovation and research, no nation can even dream to be tomorrow's superpower. Our present government realized this. From budget rocket launchers to deep ocean research to green energy, the country has taken significant leaps. The most impressive feat has been India's reach out to the world during COVID-19 with its own indigenously developed vaccine. India will reap the benefit from her demographic dividend, that is a large, well-educated English-speaking middle class. The working population would play a key role in India's continued rise as a challenger to China in the manufacturing sector. The aging labor force in China is reducing its competitive edge and its claim as the world's largest market. It is a proud moment for every Indian that our country is heading and hosting the G20 group in the year 2023, of which our Prime Minister is the chairperson. This hosting of G20 is an opportunity to leverage India's growing strategic and economic heft. In a multipolar world, India's embrace of a middle path has bolstered its image as a nation with which everyone is interested in having a good relationship. India's geophysical importance to the US and its allies has increased as American policymakers seek to thwart Beijing's rise with an increased focus on the Quad grouping that also includes Japan and Australia. India is the only country to be a member of both the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, driven by Moscow and Beijing, and the US-led Quad initiative of democracies aimed at containing China. India also confounded the BRICS grouping that brings it together with Brazil, Russia, China, and South Africa to challenge the dominant US and European-led global governance structures. For decades, India marginalized itself diplomatically content with a role within the non-aligned movement. But in the present changing strategic landscape, India's ambition to be present, to be heard, to shape, and to lead globally is getting translated into reality. At SCO Summit, PM Modi said to Russian President Vladimir Putin, "Today's era is not of war, and Putin should move on to a path of peace." This was lauded by all the NATO countries as well as Putin, who said India is a great power, a friendly nation, and a time-tested friend. The aura of present-day India is such that the Sheikh of Emirates provided land for constructing a Hindu temple. Indonesia has signaled a strong backing of India's leadership on the global stage. No Indian government before pursued the country's self-interest more assertively on the global stage. When Russian forces invaded Ukraine, Europe turned away from Russian energy, paying a huge economic price, while India upped its purchases sixfold, taking its two-way trade to an all-time high. India's self-nomination as the leader of the colonial South is a message on the global stage that India will not simply play by the rules and norms of more powerful nations. The government crackdown on BBC that met no reprimand from the US and allies shows the present government's success at leveraging the nation's rising importance. India has a multi-ethnic, multilingual, and multi-religious society living together. India's diversity makes her evolve strong foundations of tolerance and pluralism. India has a long history of cultural dialogue with many regions of the world. Her cultural influence has spread through the philosophy of religions that originated in India: Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism. Many religions with origins outside the Indian subcontinent have found followers in India. As Bharat rises with the present regime, several colonial and anti-national structures are crumbling. Article 370 that gave Kashmiri separation a boost is gone. India is on its way to getting an educational system that corrects history and regenerates civilizational knowledge. There is a massive cultural revival in the country. Most importantly, there is a growing unity of purpose and renewed pride in the Sanatan, in cultural nationalism, and a confidence in the self which is driving factor for the country to excel. June 21 has been declared World Yoga Day by UNO, and the year 2023 a year of millet, that is Shri Anna. The Indian philosophy of Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam resounded in the G20 Summit of Foreign Ministers in the words of PM Modi: "One earth, one family, one future." Before kicking off key G20 gatherings in a virtual Global South Summit, PM Modi assured the struggling nations of the South Your voice is India's voice. Your priorities are India's priorities. As poor nations face debt distress, India is pushing that conversation into the mainstream, pressuring China to be more transparent on its loans to low-income countries and to keep in control its expansionist and imperialistic policies. The world has started believing that India's efforts will translate into real change in the global order soon. Indian culture will spread into the world through the trust of the world on India and not through military conquest. Holding the torch of Indian philosophy, Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina, Sarve Santu Niramaya, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kashit Dukh Bhag Bhavet, India is definitely going to become Vishwaguru.